The slopes above town are empty this morning. They have been empty every morning, since the shafts under the hills were deemed too fetid to mine. A well-sunk track alongside the river as still winds up from the quay to the spread of tumbled stone ruins and the skeletons of rust. I am told by the elders that they are remnants of workings that once spoke flame from their bellies day and night. Shafts still pit the hillsides, but no more iron leaves Sokvaapit on the river. Now ore and coal and rock, all from the northern plateau, pass through instead, along with those who intend to work it. South to Yalpo. It comes by steam and sail from the company towns, material and young people, worn with work beyond their years, little peace in their postures in the Eubliaska in the evening. You might leave too, if what I hear of mining life on the plateau is true. Yalpo made its offer heard on the river and all across the higher shelf. None missed that signal, for its mast is known to be the greatest in the north ever raised by the weathermen. The stumps are beginning to empty. I should likely make a formal apology for the tone of last night's missive. The road has been a hard one of late, and I am still learning how, and more importantly when, to use this machine you have given me. The unpretentious hospitality I mentioned isn't the sort of thing any of you would turn down, I'm sure. No one might say these people have their share of problems. An appreciation for merriment and long tales of fancy in the late hours isn't one of them. I was, and still am, a bit out of sorts. Hence my rambling on matters of antiquity and ruminating on the question of this work's publication. Now, any discussion of the Viceans or of the grey scribes will be caught and gutted by the censors. I don't want their eyes coming to rest on this expedition from any impropriety on my part. I still have plenty of hope there will be someone to talk to out of here that can give a more traditional view of how things are and how they have been. I am confident I can get enough that someone further down the line will stitch a presentable broadcast out of it before it reaches the censors. In the end, we have to carry this out in a manner that was agreed. A contract was signed, and a sum of money was afforded to me. A sum neither of us can feign ignorance as to the nature of its implications or its origins. I understand the nature of the road you have set me upon, but I do not believe that either of us know the true motive or the lengths still to go. Actually, the use of either of us in that implies a binary dialogue that is more than likely inaccurate. I don't know how many of you are listening on the other end, but I'm assuming Orn is there at least. I can't imagine your skills have afforded you a senior leadership role, I'm sorry to say, but I still can't imagine you're not there in some capacity. Hello? It is not lost on me that your livelihood rests in the care of these words as much as mine, and I accept you likely didn't have much of a say in your instruction as to how I was to be persuaded. I can almost admire the panache of sending a single young-ish southerner to do what the Cloud Office cannot or will not. We are both under duress to produce results. And to the rest of you I say this, though I want to emphatically state I have no intent of shirking the requirement of this work. I will do it on my own terms, as much as any person in my position would. I afford myself this small comfort, and whipping the lightning upon me, now that I have carried your priceless device so very far, that would only harry any further designs I realize you might have, or at least you know your superiors must have. We need each other now. You know there are more things to be told of out here than my account of the Hoik expedition, of the stories of old grudges skulking in the plateaus and waiting in the tree line, and the unquestioning manner in which the people hold the forecast in account. From what I am told, the monasteries up in the mountains beyond Ruerdskyeg are still inhabited. Now I do not believe the stretching of their days in quiet halls sunk into the crags can have done much to fade the memories of their eldest. The half-city on the falls is not far now. There, you will have your answers, and then I shall find mine. Now, though, I will go to work, give you something that you can use. A sheep rots in the ditch. A peddler with iron pans and clay pots waves to beckon me from my course towards the mast house. The mast house in Sokvaapit is well used. Broadcasts and correspondence, they are plentiful. Towns speaking of new births and hallowed dead, and of the shifting, flowing marches of red deer and woolen rhino across these vast valleys. Prices are passed for meat and metal, paper and cloth. People complain of the old rusted machinery that keeps their sirens and their masts on the tap. And there is finally news of the landslides to the west. Now we passed through the aftermath of one ourselves on a bright, clear morning. The station had logged a great measure steeper than their prowess, and when the rain came, rushing mud and heavy silence descended, taking all the houses and the beasts and the people under themselves. It had settled to dry for some time before our caravan came slowly over the barren ground. I saw a leg, the colour of dust stuck out of the cracked surface, the sole facing the sky, and the toe pointing on down the way, the remains of the trouser leg, a ragged, fluttering prayer flag caught in the morning breeze. A quiet, sorry grave. And we now know that 4 towns have been lost the same way since we left Slen. Where I sit now at the base of the Scree slope, staring down onto the wiggly tin gables and doorways cut into the cliffs, and beyond the buttressing hills to the wide horizon of unthinkably tall trees, I can hear the crackling drone of the siren announcing the morning's forecast. I smell the coal smoke from the little stoves in every dwelling, and food wafting from the Eubliaska. The local talk holds much of the trade and the weather and the work down in Yelpo, of the movements of the NRF on the northern borders, and of what roads they are deemed safe to travel. There is some mention of our expedition, and from the stories of the elders, there has always been threat in the woods, but something has happened to stir the worry to the surface. There are masked priests conducting rituals down on the riverbanks. Beyond it all, as far as the expedition is concerned, Ruerdskyeg is still a question with no answer. When you say the name of the half-city on the falls, many around here will eye you with a flint suspicion. The seat of the old dynasty seems to be something preferably forgotten, and when it finally went dead, I don't think anyone mourned their signal. As far as I can tell, Sokvaapit is like any other town in the Stumpland, living by its location. It is a crossroads, the last navigable water, before the highlands begin to rise and fall, and the forest become too tall and too strong to ever fell, and the glacial currents cut paths too strange and fierce to sail. It is understood that no one goes to Ruerdskyeg. The people here are as they have been in every place our caravan has rested on the shelf, not taken with thoughts of far lands or forgotten names. They look to each other and to the dirt below their feet, and that is enough. They raise ibex and sheep on the wasted hillsides. They make spore paper and pottery from river clay, and the young plant trees with thoughts of years to come. And the common standard is put first and foremost. They grow fungus in the great warehouses that were built when the hills could still be mined. But for a long time now, the mine has been left well alone. Though no one would admit it, I can feel that the shade has begun to rise up here. For it to be away from the town and forgotten by most would appear to be enough, but the same elders who speak of the old days, they remember too what happens when the blinding colours of want seep in below your feet. I met the head teller of the mast house, a woman named Igren L'wetm. I inquired if any contact had been made by Ruerdskyeg in the moons since our expedition set out. She shook her gaze very gently past my head, staring the way I saw shared by the young miners with those who had helped them offload the boats and the few who furtively served them their food. I didn't expect anything different. Her pipe was out, resting in the corner of her mouth, her onyx molars glinting in the half-light of the huge room. Igren doesn't speak to many people, and she rarely eats in the Eubliaska. These days, instead, she hangs in her communion with the siren, wired up and glazed over, her pulse tapping away on the receivers, with huge reels of code tapping out and falling in fluttering coils around her feet. Deltas of deep grey veins rising in the corner of her eyes. One with the waves. This is how I found her. My questions on the history of the mast house and how the clouds taste and what she hears in the above. These rendered nothing but the most perfunctory answers. But when I asked her if anyone from town had attempted to make the journey to Ruerdskyeg themselves, she looked me in the eyes with a curiosity alive and present. I've transcribed what she said here as best as I can. A fortnight ago, there were 6 who crossed the bridge, all with the intent of seeing the half-city for themselves. They took the old road east into the forest, and only 2 returned by the same road a day before your coming. Of the rest there has been no sign. The word now lifting among the tongues of the town is that they were taken by the most hated, that they have come down again from the high places of the parent wood, and that they walk on our borders. So now the question of progress is marked by the stands of the Ruerdskyeg. Old grudges do watch the tree line, apparently. It makes me wonder who else might have thrown their intent towards the higher shelf. Before I left the echoing chitter of the mast house, I watched as Igren was lifted back up into the dark by unseen arms and resumed her communion. There is more to be heard than ever before. You know this, and it may very well be that she is listening in right now. I trust her to keep her silence, even without the threat of inspection that tuning into unauthorized frequencies brings. Now some here, they say awful things about people who sit listening to the clouds for days on end. that they work not of their own free will, but of a need that they cannot ignore, that they speak with the shade, and that the shade speaks through them. Accusations aside, out here the tellers, even those of the Cloud Office, aren't given the same support or respect they would be afforded in Slen or any of the lower countries, and nothing like the revered status that I've seen across the sea. They are simply workers, like everyone else. It's little wonder some retreat, down into the murmuring static and the scratching, tireless feedback. Even the ones born on the shelf who taught themselves to hear in the old way by simply letting it in, they don't quite have the same faith in the common standards shared by the rest of their people. I can see a figure picking its way up the track towards me. The ground shifts below in a tide, and stones rattle down and bounce around as I stand far too quick. At this distance there is no telling who it might be, and behind me the Scree slopes are a wide grey sheet, a blank sea stretching up and out into the mist. Perhaps I have come a little too high. One last thing. I saw a pillar arrive in the Eubliaska last night. It was late when they swung the high vaulting doors wide with a rush of night air. A silhouette in the archway, cut by an immeasurable burning tapestry of stars. The cascade as clear and as close as I have ever seen it. I didn't get much of a good look at the pillar themselves, save for a tattered coat and long matted hair. Their massive frame came with that unmistakable grace, past the heaps of snoring forms and the clutter of the evening's revel, and without a word or a turn of their head, ascended the stairs into the dark of the upper galleries. They are the first and only one I've seen since I left Slen. I need to try to talk to them.